Brian Welker couldn't contain his smile as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Earlier that day, he had been promoted to shift supervisor at Harding Containers, effective immediately. The cherry on the cake was working the night shift for the foreseeable future. Most people hated the night shift, but for Brian it was a great time. His son was a junior in high school. He participated in several sports and clubs. By working nights, Brian could attend his son's classes without missing work. He worked the night shift many times over the years and developed a daytime sleep system that allowed him to do it all. It was for this reason that on warm August afternoons he would crawl through the roof rafters in his attic. After he was informed of his promotion, he was given paid vacation on Thursday and Friday. It was an opportunity to rest and prepare for his new position, which would begin Sunday night. Brian had long planned to make a small apartment over his detached garage. It would become his fortress of solitude where he could sleep soundly all day long. He hoped to avoid the usual disturbances and distractions that so often occur when one tries to sleep at a time when most people are up. Brian was laying cable so he could have internet in his apartment. The Wi-Fi signal in the building just wasn't reaching the apartment. He decided to place an extension cord at the end of the attic of his house, closest to his garage, in hopes that this would give a strong signal inside his apartment. As he worked on unwinding the cable along the length of the attic, Brian heard faint sounds coming from inside his house. It was the beginning of the day, so his wife Brenda must have been at work. Tim, their son, was visiting Brenda's parents for a few days, so the house must have been empty. Brian crawled through the trusses toward where the sounds were coming from. Getting 5 meters closer, Brian was able to identify the source of the sounds. It was his bedroom. The conversation became much more distinct as Brian settled over an unused air conditioning vent in the ceiling of his bedroom. Brenda insisted that cold air was blowing at her from the old vent at night, causing her frequent neck pain. He installed a new vent as far away from Brenda's bed as possible, but never bothered to caulk the old one. That would have required caulking the hole in the ceiling created when the vent box was pulled out. Brian just left it on the ceiling but didn't attach it to any ductwork. He carefully lifted the fiberglass insulation that lay on the attic floor and slowly opened the vent. His insides clenched as he watched his wife move beneath a skinny man with what appeared to be an exceptionally white ass. As painful as that vision was, Brian couldn't look away. He couldn't stop watching the train wreck that was once his marriage. The couple had been having sex for several minutes when Brian's brain finally began to function. He set his phone to video and carefully placed it on the vent so that the camera's eye had an unobstructed view of his marital bed. "I like the way you are," the guy purred between Brenda's legs. "Does your husband ever have you?" "I asked you not to mention Brian," Brenda protested, somewhat weakly in Brian's opinion. "It's not about him. He's a good lover and a great father." "I'm sure he is. What's wrong with that situation?" "I don't know why I let you talk me into doing it here." "Ah, right here. You don't stand a chance of getting caught in your apartment. I'll be done in a minute," Brenda moaned. The guy covering Brenda suddenly tensed up. The couple froze for a moment before Brian saw the man roll off his wife. "See how strong it is when you take a risk?" Brenda's lover asked. "Having fun in my apartment most of the time is great, but having you in your marital bed is another level." Brian recognized the man enjoying his wife as soon as he rolled over onto his back. It was Bill Grant, the driver for the package delivery company where he and Brenda worked. He was recently divorced and had a daughter in Tim's class. "That sounds awful," Brenda replied, but without any real emotion. "Did you want to have sex in my bed because the thought of outdoing Brian excites you? You're acting like this is a competition." "It is a competition, at least for men," Grant replied with a soft chuckle. "You're a sexy woman and the sex is great, but knowing that you're married and I'm having sex with you in your husband's bed makes me a winner. It's an incredible feeling. It wouldn't be so great if Brian caught us here. I don't know why I agreed to this, but it won't happen again. I'm worried about Brian discovering us. It would ruin my marriage," Brenda admitted. "Let's make a deal," Grant suggested. "While you're sleeping with your husband, I won't insist that we do it in his bed. Once he's back between your legs, we'll have to go back so I can reclaim my place as leader." "I'm not going to say no to Brian. He's my husband. I can't just squeeze my legs together and expect him to go along with it, Brenda reasoned. He's a man, and he wants sex on a regular basis. You're doing what you have to do. You're horny. It's the damn air conditioner, was Brenda's reply. I'm going to try to talk Brian out of having sex and keep these suicidal encounters in my bedroom to a minimum. I don't like to think about what would happen if Brian ever caught us. Brian parked his truck in a detached garage. It was hidden from view, so Brenda had no idea he was home, and certainly no idea he was eavesdropping on her conversation. His face was covered in sweat. It dripped continuously from his body onto the insulation that covered the floor of the attic. He wouldn't let himself throw up, knowing how hard it would be to clean up and how bad the whole attic would smell. He forced himself to remain still as he listened to the loving couple dress and leave. Heading for the stairs, Brian pondered what he had just learned. The slippery bastard had his wife. She was even going to refrain from having sex with him if possible to appease and please her lover. Pondering this, Brian forced out a grim smile. Brenda would have no problem refusing to have sex with him because she would never feel him inside her again. Taking a shower, he surveyed his situation and quickly came up with a few solutions. He wouldn't let Brenda find out that he knew about her infidelity. Tim had 2 years of high school left, so Brian decided that his main focus would be his son. He wouldn't worry about Brenda anymore. He simply no longer cared what she wanted or how she felt. Why should he care about her when she obviously treated him with utter contempt? He didn't want to leave the house he'd spent 15 years remodeling so some mean jerk could live there in comfort with his wife. From the sound of Brenda's voice, it didn't sound like she was going to pursue a divorce, so Brian decided to try to hold out until Tim graduated from high school. He knew there was one thing he would need. His apartment would be finished much sooner than that. Brian decided that he would include some major improvements to it. Instead of just sleeping there while working the night shift, it would become his living space for the next year and a half. He would need a small kitchenette as well as a full bathroom. By the time Tim graduated from high school and headed off to college, Brian would have time to make a plan of how to proceed. To that end, Brian called several contractors he knew and made appointments to get estimates. He decided to hire a company to complete the job. It would be done quickly and professionally, and he would pay someone to do it. There was no longer a need to save pennies by doing everything himself. His promotion would easily allow him to cover the cost. For the first time in his life, Brian realized that his time was more important than money. If he saved $1, half of it would go to Brenda. He was done with his old lifestyle. He had always tried to do as much housework as possible, thinking it would benefit his family. That all changed when he saw Grant having Brenda. He was going to make sure that Tim's college tuition was fully funded. Besides, Brian was going to rebuild his life and have some fun doing it. He no longer felt any attachment to his unfaithful wife. Brian had dealt with his emotions by the time Brenda walked in after work and saw him sitting in the kitchen. "Are you home yet? Did you get off early for some reason?" Brian looked at Brenda closely and decided that she seemed different to him. She had a few wrinkles on her face and had put on a few extra pounds. Why hadn't he noticed this before? Had his love for his wife blinded him to her flaws? It saddened him to think of his sudden change in attitude toward Brenda, but it was her decision to have an affair. He was just reacting. "Yes, we're having a little trouble at work. I've been asked to work some nights starting tonight. They let me come home, pack a lunch, and rest. I'll be back later." "They shouldn't ask you to work nights after the day shift, even if you had some free time during the day," Brenda reasoned. "You'll be exhausted. At least lie down and sleep for a few hours." "That's a good idea," Brian replied. "I'll just crawl under the sheets and—" "Wait," Brenda insisted a little too loudly, remembering the state of the bed. "I just remembered that I need to wash the linens." "Okay," Brian replied calmly, chuckling darkly to himself at Brenda's discomfort. "I'll just use the bed in the guest room. There's no need to worry so much." A few hours later, Brian left the house like he was going to work. He went to a local sports bar, watched a baseball game, and had a few beers. Earlier, he had installed an air mattress in his future apartment. After making sure Brenda was asleep, he parked in the garage and walked up the stairs to the waiting air mattress. He slept surprisingly well. One of the contractors Brian talked to the next day was between projects, and offered a very good price if Brian would agree to start immediately. In 2 weeks, the contractor's crew would be moving to a new construction site a few kilometers away. Brian agreed and signed the contract to start work on Monday morning. His night shift would work Sunday evening through Thursday evening. The plant was to close Friday night and start up again Sunday night. Brenda knew that Brian would not have to work Friday night, so she was surprised when he got ready for bed the next night and headed to the guest room. "Why are you going to sleep in the guest room?" "We won't see each other much while you're on the night shift, so why don't you sleep in our bed?" a puzzled Brenda asked. "Since I worked last night and slept a few hours this morning while you were at work, I'm not really tired. I'm going to watch a baseball game and maybe a movie afterwards," Brian replied with his planned excuse. "I'm trying to get used to being awake at night and sleeping in the morning. I don't want to ruin your sleep unless you think we should have sex," Brian suggested, wiggling his eyebrows meaningfully. Brenda's reaction was exactly what Brian expected. If he hadn't heard her talking to her lover, he would have missed her brief deer-in-the-headlights look before she smiled weakly. "I'm really tired today. Maybe we could just cuddle for a while and go to bed," Brenda replied. "Besides, Tim is home tonight. He might hear us." "A hug won't do me any good," Brian replied. "Once I have you in my arms, I'll want to do things my way with you. If you rule out sex, I'll just remove the temptation and sleep in the guest room. You've never worried about Tim hearing us before, so it's just a bullshit excuse to avoid sex. You really don't have to make up anything. I'm not the kind of guy who imposes on a woman." "I know that, Brian. You're right. That was pretty weak, and I'm sorry. I'm just tired, and I'm not feeling romantic. I hope you understand." "I understand it better than you think. Let me know when you're in the mood. If I'm in the mood at the same time, we could get together." "Good night," Brian parried, turning and heading for the guest room, leaving Brenda with a confused expression on her face. On Saturday, Brian played ball with Tim for an hour and then did some yard work. When it was time to go to bed, he walked down the hall to the guest bedroom. Brenda stared at his back and wondered why he was acting so strange. Brian went to work early Sunday evening to prepare for his role as shift supervisor. By the time the production people started showing up, he was feeling pretty good about his work situation. He didn't bother to tell Brenda that he had been promoted to foreman. She had secrets that she kept from him, so he no longer felt remorseful about keeping anything from her. His shift went smoothly. He was well received by those who worked under him. He figured he had a great group of people on his shift. The new position meant more responsibility, but Brian had seen all the problems before and knew how to deal with them. He settled into his job with minimal adjustments or difficulties. Brenda had already left for work, and the construction crew was doing the installation when Brian returned home Monday morning. He spoke briefly with the foreman to make sure they were in agreement with each other, and then went inside. He fell asleep immediately, but was awakened several times by loud noises from the crew working in his apartment, and once by a phone call. And cursing himself for forgetting to turn off the ringer on their landline in the guest room, Brian answered sleepily. "Hello?" "I'm sorry, Brian. Did I wake you up?" his mother-in-law Beverly asked him. "Is that why you called?" Brian barked with some irritation. "You wanted to know if I was asleep?" "No need to show off," Beverly replied. "I just wanted you to know that Bill and I heard you were on the night shift and we won't bother you. If you need us to do anything for Tim while you're sleeping, just let us know." Brian hung up without answering. Unplugging the phone, he pondered how stupid people could be. It took a few minutes, but he fell back asleep. The construction crew completed their work in less than a week. Brian marveled at how the contractor had completed the entire remodel in 4 days. It would have taken him 4 months. Waking up Friday afternoon, he drove to the furniture store and ordered a double bed, a small kitchen table, 4 chairs, and a small sofa. Then he drove to a large appliance dealer and selected a large flat-screen TV, refrigerator, oven, and microwave. By Monday afternoon, his bachelor pad, Brian thought, would be ready for him to work full-time. He grinned, remembering how puzzled Brenda had been when, coming home from work on Monday, she found a crew of men bustling around the detached garage. She had approached Brian as he was talking to the foreman and insisted on a private conversation so he could tell her what was going on. "I had them finish the apartment above the garage," Brian told her. "I want to be able to sleep all day without people barging in on me or calling me. I had it double insulated to keep noise to a minimum. There won't even be a landline phone in there. Since I'll be working nights for a while, I thought it would be a huge advantage to have a place where I could sleep without disturbing you and Tim. You wouldn't even notice I'm around. I won't notice you're around, Brenda repeated. You're my husband and Tim's father. We need to know you're around. I'll go to Tim's baseball practices and games. Then I'll bring him home so he and I will spend a lot of time together. Don't worry about it. We can all have dinner together. I told you a few days ago to let me know when you're in the mood to make some special love, but you haven't taken me up on my offer yet. Are you asking me to scratch your itch tonight? You're being a jerk. Husbands are expected to do more than just have their wives whenever they feel like it. We expect talking and seducing and exchanging ideas as well as problems. Marriage is not just about rough sex, you know that. Don't even think about lecturing me on what constitutes a good marriage, Brian warned. I'll counter the effort I put into this marriage with your efforts anytime. That will work fine. All you have to do is let me know when you want me to service you in your bed. I'm not some damn cow that needs servicing, Brenda growled. You're not doing any servicing until you sincerely apologize. I want to spend a nice evening at a nice restaurant along with your apology, asshole. Brian broke out into a wide grin and simply walked away, leaving Brenda completely confused. It had been easy for her to keep Bill Grant from demanding to have sex with her in the marital bed, but what bothered Brenda was Brian's attitude. He just wasn't like himself. He was ignoring Brenda, and it bothered her. He had always been a very attentive husband. She decided that she would give Brian a memorable evening once he apologized for his rude behavior. She knew he wouldn't be able to go without sex for long. A man can't stop sleeping 2 or 3 times a week and be happy. Brenda was sure he would want what she had. He'd been like that since they'd first met. He was too young to lose interest in having fun. By the following Wednesday, Brian had completely moved into his new apartment. This coming weekend will be a 3-day weekend because of Labor Day. Tim's first year of junior high school was scheduled to start the following Tuesday. How would you two feel about going to the Diamondbacks game this weekend? Brian asked over dinner Thursday night. They're playing the Dodgers and competing for the pennant. Should be a great game. Really? That would be awesome. Thanks, Dad, Tim blurted out. You know I'm not much of a baseball fan, Brenda grumbled. I'm going to pass on this offer. I'll find something to do around the house. I bet you will, Brian said under his breath, but loud enough for Brenda to hear. It's all taken care of. Tim and I will go to Saturday's game. Wow, I can't wait to tell Scooter about this, Tim blurted out. He's going to be so jealous. He's a big Dodger fan. He used to live in Los Angeles. Why don't you invite him along? Brian suggested it. Baseball is more fun to watch with friends, especially if they're fans. I'll call him right now. Thanks, Dad, Tim answered excitedly and ran to get his phone. You certainly made Tim happy, Brenda remarked. Baseball is a great way to bond with boys. Horace is a nice, polite young man. Holy crap! Is his real name Horace? Brian asked, shaking his head. No wonder he has a nickname. What kind of parents would name a boy Horace unless they hated him? Tim told me that Horace's father died of a brain aneurysm 2 years ago, Brenda continued, defiantly ignoring her husband's comment about the boy's name. He and his mother moved here this summer to be closer to her parents. They are old and in poor health. I'll just call him Scooter and pretend I never heard his real name, Brian announced, just as Tim burst back into the room. Scooter's mom said he could go, announced an almost giddy Tim. This is going to be great. On Saturday afternoon, Tim parked his truck in the driveway of a nice ranch in a nice neighborhood. Before he could stop, Scooter was already running out the door. He jumped in next to Tim as soon as the pickup was securely parked. Mr. Welker, Mom says she wants to meet you before we leave. I think she wants to make sure you're not a serial killer, Scooter suggested. I'm sorry about that. No problem, Brian replied as he got out of the truck, walked up to the house and rang the doorbell. The door was opened by a slender, rather unassuming woman about Brian's age. Throwing what appeared to him to be a quick glance, Brian determined that her legs were her best feature. They were muscular and perfectly shaped. Her jogging shorts gave him the opportunity to admire them. Her stomach was flat while her breasts barely pushed the top away from her torso. My legs look pretty good compared to the rest of my body, don't you think? Scooter's mom asked, much to Brian's embarrassment. Well, yeah, Brian agreed, as soon as he saw the smile on the woman's face. You have a great pair of legs. Do you think I should let my son go to a baseball game with a man who looks at every woman he sees? Challenged the boy's mother. I'm trying to raise a gentleman. Brian saw the laughter in the woman's eyes. He decided to play along with her. You're actually asking if you should let your son go out with a man, since ogling women is the best part of being a man, Brian replied with a chuckle. He needs to learn to appreciate the weaker sex. I'll show him what to pay attention to and how to do it. I certainly hope you'll be less conspicuous during these life lessons you'll be giving Horace, objected the still smiling woman. The first thing I'll teach him is to punch anyone who calls him Horace, except his mom, of course, Brian joked. I see. My son will learn to be cruel to people who address him by his first name, as well as to appreciate a woman's legs. Does that explain it well enough? Not even close, Brian replied. I'll show him the fine art of sneakily appreciating asses and breasts. It's important that he get a well-rounded education and not get completely fixated on any one piece of female jewelry. That's a big relief, Scooter's mom replied, thus gaining even more respect from Brian. Have a good time, and be sure Scooter calls if you're going to be late. By the way, my name is Gertrude. Really? Gertrude. What do your friends call you? Brian asked. Oh, for my male friends, I answer to Minx, Raven, Candy, or Bubbles. My friends call me Gertrude, the woman replied with a nonchalant face. I think it sounds tempting. I'm Brian. We're going to be friends, so I'm going to call you Naughty. I kind of like that name. Why am I not surprised? Gertrude replied before bursting into hearty laughter. Horace can go with you any time he wants. I like your sense of humor. Tim is a very polite young man, so I was pretty sure his parents would be fine. Thank you for inviting him to the game. We are a baseball family. I used to go to as many Dodgers home games as I could. My dad even played in the minor leagues before I was born. He was pretty good, just not good enough professionally, Gertrude added. Scooter's a great guy, so that's not a problem. I'll keep an eye on him and make sure he gets home safe and sound, jackass. Have a good day. Does that still apply? I was just kidding, Gertrude protested. You'll always be jackass to me, came the quick reply as Brian turned and headed back to the truck. Brian had had a great day at the game. Scooter managed to catch the occasional ball. Both boys ate too many hot dogs and drank too much soda. They fell asleep in the back seat of the truck before Brian could even drive out of the parking lot. Upon reaching Scooter's house, Brian gently woke the boy and escorted the sleepy teenager to the front door, where he was greeted by a radiant Gertrude. He probably ate too many hot dogs and sodas, Brian admitted. Of course he did. He was at the ball game, Gertrude replied. Thanks so much for picking him up and bringing him back safe and sound. It was my pleasure. Scooter's a great guy, Naughty, Brian parried. See you at the boys' games. Brian had gotten used to the routine, which worked out well for him. He would come home, have a light breakfast, and then sleep from 9 to 3. With the extra soundproofing and thick curtains on the windows, he usually slept soundly. Brenda sometimes complained that he always slept in his man cave, even on weekends. She left the subject alone as soon as Brian asked if she needed his services. Brian decided that she was really worried that Grant would insist on having sex in her bedroom and she would get caught. That was perfectly fine with Brian. It indicated that she wasn't going to ask for a divorce at this point. His goal of staying married until Tim graduated from high school seemed achievable. Since he was a foreman and getting less exercise, Brian bought a home exercise machine that was advertised as a full-body workout. To his pleasant surprise, it worked as advertised as long as he was diligent in its use. He attended all of Tim's baseball practices, and soon the coach had him working with a few kids on the sidelines while the coach ran drills with another group of players. Tim was a pretty good player and was showing signs of improvement, but Scooter was a real surprise to Brian. He had shown some talent early in the season, but was tentative and timid. Brian worked with him as much as he could. They even spent a few hours on weekends practicing at a local park. Brian decided that since he wasn't having sex, he might as well relieve the tension by playing baseball with the boys. As Scooter's confidence grew, his level of play increased dramatically. By mid-season, Scooter was fielding ground balls and playing shortstop at a high level. Tim was the starting center fielder and was batting third. Brian was extremely proud of both boys' accomplishments. One thing that Brian couldn't help but notice was the attention that some of the children's mothers were starting to give him. For some reason, his jokes actually made them laugh. His efforts with the children were constantly praised. A few of the mothers would bake something for the team, but they always made sure he got a piece, no matter what it was. Tim's friendship with Scooter and the time Brian spent with the boys naturally led to Gertrude and Brian spending time together. Brian thought of her as an intelligent friend with a great sense of humor. He decided to ask Gertrude if she had noticed the increased interest his mothers were showing in him. "I may be a little out of line, Naughty, but I have to ask you a slightly personal question," Brian began. "Almost a size 2, was Gertrude's quick reply. "What? I didn't ask that," Brian admitted. "When men preface a question to a lady by saying it's personal, don't they usually ask her about her breast size?" "Well, yes, that's usually true," Brian agreed with a chuckle. "In this case, I was going to ask if you've noticed that some mothers have started treating me differently in the last couple weeks. Don't you think they seem a little friendlier lately?" "Well, aren't you Mr. Observant?" Gertrude parried. "You really don't know what's going on, do you?" "I'd need more information regarding the what you're referring to before I could answer that question," Brian said thoughtfully. "I understand the homestead flight rule. I know you never win the first or last inning at third base. You're not referring to those baseball axioms, are you?" "No, I was talking about the unwritten rule of never tampering or stealing bases when you have a huge advantage," Gertrude snickered before becoming more serious. "If you were paying attention, you'd know that the friendliest mothers on the team are also single moms. You're a great dad, a good-looking guy, and you have a pretty decent job. That makes you a damn attractive candidate in their eyes," Gertrude reasoned. "So, what about the fact that I'm a married man? Wouldn't they take that into consideration?" Brian asked. "They would," replied Scooter's mom. "That's why they didn't really try to seduce you? No one has tried that yet, have they?" "No one's ever seduced me. Like that was ever a problem," Brian replied. "I'm married, so obviously I can't be a good match for anyone." "Brian, I don't like that I seem to be the one who has to tell you this, but we're friends, so it falls on me. All mothers know your wife is cheating on you. That's not good enough. Rumor has it that she's cut you off from sex. You don't sleep together, and it's pretty obvious that you're going to be a free agent in the not-too-distant future. These women want to put you on their team as soon as you're released." Brian was stunned by Gertrude's revelation. How could so many people know about his personal situation? Who could know about his sex life, or lack thereof? And then it hit him. Brenda must have told that bastard that we weren't sleeping together, and he bragged about it to someone, that miserable asshole. "Do you mean your wife or her lover?" Gertrude asked, trying to lighten the mood. "I have to say, you don't seem very surprised by the rumors. Have you suspected Brenda of infidelity before?" "No, I never suspected it," Brian replied. "You had no idea at all?" Gertrude asked incredulously. "I knew she was cheating. I just never suspected it," Brian replied. "That's where you really hit me. How could you know it and not suspect it? It's pretty simple. I didn't suspect a damn thing until I found Grant having Brenda in our bed." In a matter of seconds, I went from knowing she was cheating on me to certainty. I had completely stopped being suspicious. "This revelation raises more questions than it answers," said his confused girlfriend. "You've seen them perform horizontal mambo, but you stay married and you don't go to jail. You're not a swinger, are you? Or a guy who likes to watch? Please don't be one of those scumbags." "I'm not going to be. Don't worry about it," Brian assured me. "I've decided to adjust my priorities. Being able to spend a lot of quality time with Tim and not be a part-time dad was my first goal. Living with Brenda rather than divorcing her seemed like the best way to accomplish this. I started working nights, and that always took a toll on our sex life. I built a nice apartment over my detached garage and lived there. I told Brenda that it was so I could sleep during the day without being harassed and annoyed about the day-to-day crap. She wasn't happy with the sleeping arrangements, but Grant told her that every time she had sex with me, he would insist on having her in our marital bed. This seemed to bother her, but not enough to stop sleeping with him. She thinks her affair is a secret and wants to keep it a secret. I didn't tell her, but I won't have sex with her for any reason. I went to the clinic and got tested for STDs. I'm clean. I want to keep it that way. Are you serious? Did you hear that? What a bitch. How can she treat a guy like you so badly? What a jerk that guy is. Gertrude was outraged. All the single moms think you'd be a great match. I think you may have an inflated opinion of my desirability. I've never been a matinee idol. I have a really good job, so maybe it would help me look better in the eyes of some of the more desperate women, Brian suggested. Are you kidding me? Look how handsome you are. You have a wonderful smile, Gertrude pointed out. You're strong, kind, smart, and great with kids. If I wasn't so unattractive and flat-chested, I'd have thrown my hat in the ring by now along with my full-cup bra. I think, I better shut the hell up. Thanks for being a good enough friend to tell me what people say and think, Brian replied, frowning. I didn't realize that everyone knows I'm a cuckold. It's pretty embarrassing. I can't make my own wife happy. I'm a world-class wuss. You're a good man who wants to be a good father to his son. You're strong enough to take this shit, so you can have a great relationship with Tim. Horace thinks you're pretty cool, too. Who? Brian asked. You must feel better if you can tease me with Horace's name, Gertrude remarked with a smile. Naughty girl. You're a great friend. You didn't let me stick my head too far up my ass. I just hope Tim doesn't find out. That horse has either left the stable or is damn close to it, Gertrude informed. Horace says Tim knows something's wrong at home. You're largely avoiding his mother. He's bound to hear something when so many people know about it. Do you know what worries me? Gertrude added. Scooter is in love with Heather Grant. How awkward is that for him and for me? She's a nice girl. She has no idea what a pathetic jerk her father is. I'm just glad Tim isn't the one sniffing around Heather, Brian stated. What a mess that would have been. I should be glad for small favors. Scooter told me that Tim is very interested in Holly Ingram, but that shouldn't surprise you too much. She comes to every game and cheers his every move, declared a smiling Gertrude. Yes, I've noticed her hanging around. She seems like a nice girl. I knew her dad and uncles in high school, Brian recalled. They're a nice family. 2 nights later, Tim's team was playing in the first round of the district championship. Brian realized that as game time approached, he was probably more nervous than Tim. It didn't help that the usual 3 single mothers were determined to get his attention. Norma Wilson was wearing a top that exposed a good portion of her lush breasts. She was constantly finding reasons to lean over to Brian to pick something up or look for something. Brian had to admit that her cleavage was impressive. Brandy Dorn kept her breasts covered, but in a very tight sweater. Her slim waist and flat stomach emphasized the allure of her full, firm breasts. She kept asking Brian questions about the team and the players. Jillian Patterson was less subtle. For some reason, she had to stand close enough to Brian to rest her impressive breasts against his arm or side. Gertrude smirked understandingly, handing him a soda and a hot dog before returning to her seat on the first base side of the diamond. Brian noticed that all 3 ladies had found some reason to leave his entourage, all at the same time. He thought it was odd until he heard a familiar voice behind him. I thought I would join my husband this afternoon to watch my son play. I didn't realize I'd have to wade through so many groupies to get to him, Brenda remarked, louder than necessary. What's going on, Brian? The game hasn't been announced yet, but Tim looked pretty good at batting practice, Brian replied, trying to dodge the question. Nice try, Brenda snapped back. Why were those women hovering around you like flies over shit? Good thing you're not allergic to silicone. If you're asking me to explain how the female mind works, you're out of luck. I have no idea, Brian admitted. I'm even surprised you're here. My son is in an important game. I'm here to support him. Obviously, there are other mothers here. Obviously, some of them aren't just here for their kids. You've been too busy to come to the games, Brian remarked. How did you manage to dodge your obligations today? Brenda glanced at her husband when he mentioned her commitments. She wondered for a moment if he was hinting at something. As soon as the thought crossed her mind, she immediately dismissed it. If he had any suspicions, he'd be much angrier and much more confrontational. The only thing she knew about Brian was that he would never put up with her cheating. If he knew, he would let her know it in the most obvious way possible. I've carved out some time. This game is important to Tim, which makes it important to me. I haven't seen much of you since you left for the night shift, so I thought it would be nice to spend some time together cheering Tim on, Brenda reasoned. As Brenda and Brian sat down in the bleachers, she noticed that there were several other mothers watching her, and they didn't seem so friendly. Brenda thought about it for a moment. What could she have done to piss off the other mothers? This was the first game she had ever attended. She had no other form of interaction with any of them, so she couldn't think of any reason why they might dislike her. Brenda then noticed Gertrude sitting off to the side. As usual, she didn't manage to stand out in any way, although Brenda noticed that her hair was professionally styled and her legs looked good in her shorts, which were perhaps a little short, especially considering the cool afternoon temperature. The game began and Brian's attention was drawn to the playing field. The first two batters struck out before Tim even entered the batter's box. Brenda was concerned for her son when she saw how fast the first pitch was and how close it traveled from his head. The second pitch was low and away from Tim, but he connected reliably and threw the ball to first base for a stand-up double. The next batter was Scooter. Brenda noticed that he seemed older, stronger, and more confident than last summer. The first pitch came into the catcher's glove next to Scooter's head. If he hadn't leaned back, she might have hit him. Brenda heard Brian chuckle as Scooter prepared for the next pitch. Trying to intimidate these two boys is a big mistake, Brian stated to those within earshot. I just hope the pitcher tries to discreetly throw a fastball to Scooter. The rest of the audience nodded in agreement as the pitcher began his pitch. He was a strong thrower, and on the next pitch, he added something extra. There was a loud crack as Scooter's bat met the baseball crossing the court. Oohs and ahs echoed through the stands as the ball disappeared over the center field fence. Tim jogged to the plate and waited until his friend touched home plate before exchanging high fives. Gertrude glowed with pride as she watched her son round the bases. She glanced at Brian only to see small tears on his cheeks. He had spent countless hours practicing on the field and batting the ball around with Tim and her son. His pleasure and pride was almost palpable. Gertrude was extremely grateful to Brian for the mentoring he had provided her son since their arrival. Horace was growing up to be a fine young man, and Brian had played a huge role in building his character. Are you really going to tell me that you haven't had sex with your husband since the day we slept together in your house? Her incredulous lover asked. You said I should stay away from him for as long as I could, and you wouldn't insist on sex in our house until he made love to me. He worked the night shift that day and has been sleeping in the room above the garage ever since. We haven't even shaken hands since. That's just crazy, Bill replied. He's too young and you're too hot for him to lose interest in sex. Is he gay? Does he have a girlfriend or something? He's definitely not gay, Brenda insisted. He's very manly. He would never cheat on me. He just works nights and is tired most of the time. He only shows up for dinner, except on weekends when he's working in the yard and stuff. No normal man married to an ass like you would voluntarily give it up, even if he worked 18 hours a day, Grant stated. He must be cheating. That should make it easier for us to communicate. He gets what's his, and I get what used to be his. Brian would never cheat on me, Brenda stated firmly. He takes our marriage vows very seriously. He's not the kind of man to sneak around and get involved in some tawdry affair. Is that what you think you're doing? Bill demanded. Well, no, it's only a temporary thing. He's been too busy with work and Tim's baseball to pay much attention to me. I deserve some fun. I work hard to run the household and cook and work full-time, Brenda reasoned. We know it won't be for long. Bill smiled as he pondered Brenda's words. I suppose you're right. We'll just enjoy the sex while it's happening. Give me a day when I can fuck you in your bed. It still turns me on. As Brenda remembered Bill's words, She became concerned as she watched the two girls twirling around Brian slowly withdraw. It was obvious he had some damn attractive women with big breasts and taut bodies who were interested. She realized she needed to protect her marriage from the efforts of these bitches. Then she noticed Gertrude sitting off to the side alone. Brenda quickly devised a plan. She smiled broadly and sat down next to a surprised Gertrude. "It's good to see you again, Gertrude. Horace has become quite a good baseball player, and he's a very sweet boy. You ought to be proud of him." "I am proud," admitted a wary Gertrude. "Tim is doing very well, too. Brian's time with them is paying off. He's really been a great mentor to Horace." "Yes, sometimes Brian is too good," Brenda replied, seeing an opportunity for her suggestion. "I'm sure you've noticed how those big-breasted blondes are always hanging around him. I was wondering if you could help me out. I know Brian would never go astray under normal circumstances, but he's a man, and all these women do is show off their big boobs and spread their legs when they're around him." "How do you expect me to help you?" Gertrude asked. "Spray them with cold water when they get too close? You know I can't attend most games and practices because of my job and other commitments," Brenda began cautiously. "I know I can trust Brian to you. You're not his type at all. If you would just stick around when I'm not around, I would really appreciate it. I'm going to tell Brian that he needs to stay close to you and be more careful. Those husband-stealing bitches will think he's stopping at you and hopefully leave him alone. I know it might be embarrassing for you to pretend like this, but there's a good reason. You could save our marriage." "Please let me be clear if I've understood correctly," replied an incredulous Gertrude. "You're worried that those attractive, sexy single moms might seduce Brian, so you're asking me to sort of fill in for you when he's at ball games and practices. You think I'm a well-off single mom because I don't have big boobs and I'm pretty unattractive looking? I didn't say you were dull. I just know Brian. For whatever reason, he's less likely to fall in love with you than he is with some pudgy-breasted former cheerleader. You'd be helping him keep his vows." "You think cheating on your spouse is a deal-breaker?" Gertrude asked thoughtfully. "Would it be so awful if he slept with a few of those willing ladies while you remain his number one?" "I hope you're joking," Brenda objected. "I love my husband, but I would never tolerate cheating. It's really the deal-breaker you mentioned. It's destroying the marriage contract. I could never condone infidelity. As far as I'm concerned, the marriage would be over. You must understand how I feel. You've been married for years." "I understand loyalty and commitment. It makes sense that adultery violates the marriage contract," Gertrude admitted. "I have to agree." "I need to go over to Brian's. Can I count on you to keep a close eye on him when I'm not around?" Brenda asked. "Oh, yes," replied Gertrude with a smile. "Be sure to explain all this to Brian. I'll keep my end of the bargain. Who better to keep a good man celibate than a flat-chested, unattractive, boring woman?" "I wouldn't have phrased it quite that way, but you covered it pretty well." "Thanks again," Brenda replied as she left to join her husband. Last night, Brenda wanted to talk before I left for work. Brain began at practice the next day. "The bottom line is that there are too many sexy single moms hanging around me. She thinks I'd be a lot safer if I stayed close to you, Naughty, or as she calls you, Gertrude. Why wouldn't I feel safer?" "You're a smart man. You know you'll never be safe around a single woman, no matter how small her breasts are or how unattractive she looks," Gertrude joked. "Naughty, you're one of the most attractive women I've ever met," Brian replied sincerely. "You're the whole package, not just silicone and bleach." "Wow, you've only made my job harder," Gertrude blushed and admitted. "I'll make an appointment to have your eyes checked after baseball season is over. You'll find that I have 50-50 vision, and I'm an excellent judge of character with one glaring exception," Brian declared. "I think I underestimated my loving wife." "I think she may have underestimated us," Naughty replied. "That is if you really find me attractive." Brian was amused by the reaction of the single mothers as Jackass stayed by his side. He spent a lot of time talking and joking with her. The most common reaction was disbelief, followed by disappointment. It took less than one practice for Naughty to cross him off the herd. The team's next game required a 3-hour trip to Middleburg. It was decided that the team would hit the road the day before the game and spend the night in a hotel. It was hoped that the boys would be rested and fresh for their next challenge. Brian drove Jake Winston's parents as well as Jackass. Discussion along the way centered on the team's chances of winning the district game and possibly the state title. They arrived at the hotel right behind the team bus. Brian helped Ralph Winston get his luggage out of the trunk. Some parents, including the Winstons, volunteered to accompany the boys and had to stay at the same hotel. All other parents had to make reservations at different hotels. Since several games were played the next day, there was a very large gathering of fans and players in town. 6 teams from different grades of schools would compete in 3 games. Before Tim got on the bus, Brian told him that he would not be staying at the same hotel and should behave himself in front of his coaches and chaperones. He assured his son that he would be at the team's practice the next morning. "What hotel are you staying at, Naughty?" Brian asked as the Winstons rolled their bags into the team hotel. "The same hotel as you," was her simple answer. "I never told you which hotel I was staying at. How did you know?" a puzzled Brian asked. "I didn't know that," came the short reply. "How did you know we were in the same hotel? It's pretty busy this weekend. You might not be able to get a room at the last minute," Brian pointed out. "I'm sure something will come up," Gertrude replied with a wide smile, confusing Brian even more. Brian arrived at his hotel a few minutes later and asked Gertrude, "Naughty, do you want to see if you can get a room while I check in? I can wait to make sure you find something." "Thanks, but I'll just wait here. I'll be fine," she insisted. Brain finally began to have an epiphany as he checked in and picked up his room access cards. He walked back to his truck and found Jackass already waiting for him. "Is there any chance you might want to get one of those cards for my room?" he asked. "It's room 207. "What a thoughtful gesture," Jackass exclaimed, getting out of the car, accepting the keys, and kissing Brian on the cheek. "Let's get into bed. It's going to be a long night." The next morning, Brian woke up much more tired than when he went to bed. At first, he mentally struggled with the reality of breaking his marriage vows, but Jackass helped him get over it. "Let's look at this logically. Not only did Brenda cheat on you, but she agreed to remove herself from you sexually. Even if she hadn't, she would still be jeopardizing your health by having unprotected sex with a damn cat. In essence, she made sexual relations with her unsafe and unwanted. She freed you from your vows and your prenup. I haven't had sex in over 2 years. I got tested and I'm clean. You were tested after you discovered she was a cheating whore and you are clean. I've been on the pill for over a month hoping to sleep with you. Can you honestly give me one good reason why we shouldn't sleep together? Is it because of my looks? Your wife thought I was the perfect cover for all the lush-breasted, beautiful women who showed interest in you because she knew I would never attract you sexually. Am I just not desirable? Naughty girl, you are extremely desirable. Don't ever say you're not. I've never cheated on Brenda, and that requires some adjustment in my thinking, but you've made an excellent case for us being together. I'm ready," Brian stated with a smirk. "There's something else you need to know first," Naughty replied. "Both of my parents are in hospice care and are not expected to live long. My brother has been sending game films of Horace to his friend. My friend is the baseball coach at the best prep school in Los Angeles. If Horace gets a baseball scholarship next year, we'll probably move back. I like you a lot, but we don't expect to be in a long-term relationship. It can't last forever. Look at us. You're a handsome married man who's cheating on his wife. I'm a simple woman, and I have a son who has a chance to get an athletic scholarship to a good university. I have to do what's best for Horace," she concluded. "Good to hear about Scooter," Brian stated proudly. "He's a good kid and a very talented baseball player. I'm glad he will have a chance to hone his skills in a highly competitive environment and get a good education at the same time. You are the main reason he is getting attention from top schools. I know how much time and labor you put into him. It's ironic that you, being such a good mentor to my son, actually gave us the opportunity to move back to LA, away from you. I don't think I'm going to get anything like a one-night stand," Brian said. "Maybe it would be better to give up sex altogether than to have one-night stands and become a monk again." "You're a stupid man." I said, "We'll probably go back to LA for the next school year. That's more than 6 months away. A guy could have a lot of fun in 6 months. unless he's too old for a steady diet of hot sex with a very needy woman. That's what we just need to find out. Will you live up to your nickname, Naughty? Brian joked. I'll do it for you, big boy, promised Naughty Boy. When you need me, just whistle and I'll teach you how to whistle. I've always been told that my whistling is quite respectable, Brian quipped. Then you're doing it wrong, Gertrude retorted. The baseball team won the state championship, and Scooter received a scholarship to attend a prestigious California prep school. Both of Gertrude's parents passed away just before Thanksgiving, a week apart. Brian and Tim attended their funeral. Brian met Gertrude's brother and liked him immediately. Brian, meet my brother Dexter, Gertrude introduced him. Dexter, this is Horace's baseball coach and our good friend Brian. Holy crap, Brian exclaimed. Your name is Dexter? That's right, agreed Gertrude's brother. Only Gertrude and my parents have ever called me Dexter. I answer to Grim the same way everyone else does. What do you call my sister? I call her Naughty, but don't ask me why, Brian insisted. I don't think I need to ask, Grim replied with a laugh. Brian spent Thanksgiving with Brenda and Tim at her parents' house. For the first time in months, Brian caught himself getting ready to go to bed with Brenda. They had always stayed over Thanksgiving night, and Brian couldn't think of a good excuse to change that tradition. Brenda took her time undressing in front of Brian. He tried to restrain his reaction. Brenda was a very attractive woman with a nice, trim body. It's been a long time since we've slept together, Brenda murmured. You must be in need of love by now. Make love to me. Brian felt awkward about his next comment even as he replied, Are you finally admitting that you need proper maintenance? I knew you'd break down. I'd be happy to please you and put a wide smile on your face in time for the holiday. You miserable bastard, you won't get any women for years to come with that fucking attitude, Brenda growled. What's wrong with you? You can just forget I ever thought about letting you even touch me. Okay, was Brian's only response as he rolled over so that his back was to Brenda. He didn't overemphasize his comment, even though it was out of character. It did accomplish his goal, which was to avoid sex with Brenda. However, Brian did regret that his marriage had disintegrated to its current state. Brenda was bothered by Brian's snide remark, which made it hard for her to sleep. Lying next to him, she wondered if he knew about her affair, or if he was just feeling unhappy because they hadn't had sex lately. She decided that she would have to discuss it with Bill. He needed to forget about having sex with Brenda in her marital bed if she was having sex with Brian. This statement caused her to avoid her husband and say no to him, which could eventually make him suspicious. It could have destroyed her marriage. Brian had a routine that he followed when he worked the night shift. He went home, ate a small breakfast, and went to bed by 9 a.m. Often he would be awakened around 2 in the afternoon by Naughty crawling naked into bed with him. They would make love for an hour before she left to be home when Scooter got home from school. Baseball was over for the season. This allowed Brian to shower and shave when Tim got home from school. Brian often took a nap in the evening before leaving for work. All in all, things worked out well for Brian and Naughty. One evening in early December, Brian got a call from Tim shortly after coming to work. Dad, Scooter and I are out with Heather and Holly in Heather's car. You said we could be out until midnight because there's no school tomorrow. We have a problem. Heather was driving her mom's car. We have a flat tire and no spare tire in the trunk. We're stuck on D Street, and I'm a little worried. I see some guys down at the arcade, and they're looking in our direction. You broke down on freaking D Street? At the goddamn arcade? Brian swears out. We'll discuss this later. Heather is driving that Corolla? Yes, it's a 2017 Corolla, Tim answered quickly. I'll find a wheel and tire that fits it, and I'll be right there. Keep your doors locked and call the police if you have any problems. Take care of those girls. Brian slipped his phone into his pocket and headed for the production floor. He quickly found the man he needed. Gus, you're still driving that Corolla, aren't you? Brian asked the bearded man operating the forklift. I need an inflated tire that fits your car, and I need it right now. While Brian was talking to Gus, another thought occurred to him as Jack Reynolds walked by. Jack was Holly's uncle. His younger sister was Holly's mother. Jack, my son, and a few friends were stuck on D Street with a flat tire and no spare. Holly is with them. I grab an inflated tire from Gus and head over there. I'd appreciate it if you'd come with me. I have a real spare tire, not some fucking donut, Gus stated. Let's take my car and go over there right now. Jack, Gus, and Brian immediately headed for the door leading to the parking lot. They were concerned about the kids being in this part of town late at night. It was not a good place for good kids, especially teenage girls. Brenda lay in bed, enjoying the warmth she always felt after fiddling with Bill. His cell phone rang and he glanced at the caller ID. Damn it, it's Heather. I have to answer this or she's going to beat the shit out of me for ignoring her. Brenda could only hear one part of the conversation but was concerned about what she overheard. What the hell are you kids doing in there? Well, that's too bad. Those boys are old enough to handle a little problem like this. Call AAA. It's not my fault your mother's too dumb not to keep a spare tire in her car. What was all that about? Brenda asked as soon as Bill cut the connection. Nothing to worry about, was Bill's reply, as he reached out and stroked Brenda's firm breasts. Heather has a flat tire, but she's calling AAA to get it fixed. Several young hoodlums were hanging around Heather's car when Brian and his friends pulled up right behind her. Brian quickly got out of the car and pulled a jack and tire iron out of Gus's trunk. Gus brought the spare tire and Jack knocked on the driver's side window and gestured for Heather to lower it so he could talk to her. You guys sit tight until we change the tire. If these assholes cause any trouble, we'll take care of it. Holly, you're going to have to explain to your mother why you're even here on D Street. Brian moved the jack behind the flat rear tire and slid it under the frame. He twisted it until it rested tightly against the frame, then moved in front of the tire to loosen the lug nuts. The apparent leader of the group of tough guys approached Jack as Brian worked on the tire. You're on our turf here. You need my permission before you mess around with this car. Before Jack could respond, Brian abruptly swung the tire iron around and cracked the guy in both shins. The man fell to his knees and then rolled on the ground, rubbing his shins and cursing the blue streak. Brian grabbed the punk by the scruff of his neck and dragged him face down to lie down next to the flat tire. He then sat the man on his back and proceeded to unscrew the nuts. The two closest gang members rushed toward them, obviously intent on pulling Brian away from their incapacitated leader. Jack struck the first one in the side of the head, and he collapsed like a man. As Gus stepped forward, the other guy backed out of his reach. Lift the car up a little, and I'll take this tire off, Brian told Jack in a calm voice. Jack continued to crank the car higher and higher, while the gang of thugs shouted insults and curses at the men. Every now and then, the guy under Brian would try to twist out from under him, but Brian would grab the man by the greasy hair, lift his head a few inches, and sharply press it back against the sidewalk. It only took 2 lessons before the man on the ground decided to stay still. Brian unscrewed the lug nuts and removed the flat cover. He took the serviceable tire from Gus and put it in place. Once he had tightened all the tabs tightly, Jack lowered the car. All 3 men seemed oblivious to the thugs who taunted them as they worked. Brian tightened the lug nuts and stood up. He accidentally kicked the leader in the balls as he was about to step over him. Are you stupid bastards talking to us? Brian asked, walking over to the gathered gang members and tossing the tire iron carelessly from hand to hand. As soon as he headed towards them, the group dispersed. You guys get the hell out of here, Jack instructed as Brian pushed the gang further away from the car. Be careful not to run over those stupid bastards lying in the street and stay out of this part of town. The 3 men climbed back into Gus's car and followed Heather's car as it reached the next intersection and turned toward the kids' house. I can't believe you kicked that dumb bastard in the shin like that, Gus laughed. He collapsed like a sack of shit. Thanks for inviting me along, Jack added. My arm hurts, but it felt good to crack that punk over the head. So you were sitting on your ass while you changed the tire, Gus chuckled. That was fun to watch. The men were still laughing and talking about their experience as they went back to their workstations. By morning, the story had traveled all over the plant. Stories of courage and adventure were always popular, especially on the night shift. They helped the nights go by faster and gave everyone a distraction from how tired or sleepy they felt. The next day, when Brian woke up, Naughty jumped into bed with him and kissed him long and hard. She was naked and clearly lusting after him. "Horace told me what happened last night. You were marvelous." "Thank you for taking such good care of the children," Naughty blurted out. "You're about to get so lucky. I would have gotten here sooner, but I had to wait until Horace and Tim went to visit the girls since they don't have school today." Brenda had only been at work for an hour when Sue Blaine approached her at the water cooler. It was obvious she wanted to talk about something. "I heard Brian, Jack Reynolds, and Gus Benson having a bit of a tiff with a few potential tough guys who were crowding around the kid's car on D Street. I understand that getting hit in the shins with a tire iron kicks the crap out of a punk pretty quickly." Brenda immediately put it all together. Last night, Heather had called her father looking for help, but he had brushed her off. Apparently, her problem was more serious than Bill recognized. Sue used the word children, so that probably meant Holly was involved along with Horace and her son, Tim. "I'm curious about what you've heard," Brenda replied. "I'd like to see if the rumors are close to the truth." By the time Sue finished telling her about what the rumor mill was spreading, Brenda was furious with Bill Grant, even though he had kept the fact from Sue. His daughter had gone to him for help in a situation that could have turned disastrous, and Bill had simply brushed off her concerns. Brian, along with Gus and Holly's Uncle Jack, reacted as men should. They protected the children and helped them out of a difficult situation. Bill ignored his daughter's plight in favor of sex with Brenda. The realization that she was having sex with a man who refused to help her own daughter and some of her friends, including Tim, hurt her deeply. How low had she fallen? Brian was 10 times better than Bill. The sad thing was that Brenda had known that all along. Why had she ever gotten involved with that selfish, pompous ass? Early that morning, Brenda found Bill alone in the break room enjoying a snack while his delivery truck was being serviced. She, wasting no time, pounced on him. "Heather came to you for help last night, and you blew her off. Those kids could have been in grave danger, and yet you told her to call AAA. What kind of father are you?" "It all worked out," Bill answered cheerfully. "Your husband and a few of his buddies saved the day, so what's the problem?" "Brian reacted like a real man. You turned your back on your daughter." "That's the problem. My son was in that car." "If your dumbass husband is so special, why is it that I'm the one who has you while he hasn't slept in months?" Bill asked with a chuckle. "You're a pathetic motherfucker. Being a man has nothing to do with the size of your dignity," spat out Brenda. "He's more of a man than you'll ever be." "As far as I'm concerned, I beat that wuss in everything that matters," Bill replied before taking another sip of his soda. "That's it," Brenda announced. "It's over between us. Don't ever try to talk to me again. I don't want anything to do with you." "Whatever you say," was Bill's calm reply. "There are plenty of married women in the world looking for a big one like mine. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. I'll still fuck you if you ask nicely." Brenda burst into tears and ran out of the room. She was cheating on her husband, disrespecting him, and risking her marriage and family for a petty, selfish sociopath. She only hoped Brian would never find out how stupid she had been. With that thought, she realized she had a lot of catching up to do. Shalunya had just brought Brian to a violent climax when she heard a sniffle from behind her back. Surprised, Jackass turned around and found Brenda watching her with tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me?" Brenda exclaimed. "I trusted you both, and you do this." "I'm just doing what you asked," Naughty replied, reaching for her clothes and starting to put them on after she pressed a finger to Brian's lips, ordering him to be quiet. "You wanted me to keep those busty blondes from launching their claws at Brian. I sacrificed my body to accomplish your goals." "I didn't want you to sleep with him, and you know it," Brenda replied as anger began to crowd out her tears. "I can't believe Brian could cheat on me like that, and especially with some skinny bitch. I know it's hard to stomach the fact that Brian and I are facing freaks, but there's no reason to be insulting," Jackass reasoned. "Your poor husband was ready to explode. I'm just helping relieve the pressure he was putting on me." Bill Grant didn't want you to have sex with your husband, so Brian had to go to someone. Luckily, I was in the right place at the right time. You can thank me for helping you turn Brian off so completely and making Bill happy. By the way, where's Bill? Is he in your bed?" "You know about Bill?" Brenda exclaimed. "Well, yes," replied Naughty. "I think most of the free world knows about Bill. You've been sleeping with him for months now. He promised you that he would have you in your marital bed every time you had sex with Brian, so you stopped having sex with your own husband. Fortunately, Bill was able to fill the resulting void. Pun intended. If Brian knew, why didn't he say anything? Why did he let Bill and I sleep together for so long?" Brenda asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're a smart girl. What would most men do when they discovered their wife was a cheating whore?" "He'd get really angry and yell at me. Then he'd probably divorce me," Brenda added when the reality of the situation became clearer. "That sounds about right. What's going to happen next? Will Brian and Tim be able to stay here while you move in with Bill?" Naughty asked calmly. "I wouldn't move out of my house. I wouldn't give up Tim either. If Brian wanted a divorce, he'd have to move out. He'd have to pay alimony and child support. Tim would stay with me," Brenda concluded. "Exactly what Brian envisioned," Naughty agreed. "Suppose that staying close to Tim and being the best father possible was his first goal. How would he accomplish that goal?" "By not divorcing me," Brenda answered quietly. "He stayed here for Tim, not for me. He found out about me and Bill and basically divorced me, just not legally. We've been living as a divorced couple for months now, haven't we? I was just too damn stupid to realize it." "In your defense, Bill helped you overlook that your husband was long gone emotionally. I'm just a skinny bitch who showed up after you screwed things up. I helped Brian heal. I told Bill that it's over between us. I never want to see him again," Brenda declared. "Was that after he refused to help his daughter out of a bad situation last night? You didn't have much choice, did you?" Naughty asked rhetorically. "Even cheaters have some expectations and some limitations." "Are you and Brian going to live together now?" Brenda asked, wiping the remaining tears from her eyes. "Honestly, we're quite happy with what we have. Horace and I will be moving back to Los Angeles before school starts in the fall," Naughty admitted. "I'd rather he not know that his mom is sleeping with his best friend's dad if there's anything that can be done about it. When it's time for me to leave, I'll probably help Brian pick out a new girlfriend if he'll let me. So, you see, I didn't steal your husband like other mothers hope to do. We're temporarily enjoying each other's company almost as much as you did with the asshole." "What if I don't let it go on? He's my husband! You have no right to sleep with him," Brenda insisted. "You gave me that right as soon as you decided to spread your legs for Bill Grant," replied Naughty. "That pretty much freed Brian from any obligation he might have had to you. He and I are exceptional people. We can trust each other if you can imagine such a thing." "I told Brian that he can't have sex with you or anyone else if he wants me around," Naughty added. "Who knows what other whores Bill Grant slept with or what diseases he might have had? You could have all sorts of disgusting shit festering in that nasty thing." Brenda cried again as she pondered the statement of the woman she knew as Gertrude. Could Bill have slept with someone else on the side? Of course he could. Brenda was no longer under any illusions as to what kind of man Bill Grant was. She needed to get herself examined as soon as possible. "What's going to happen now?" Brenda asked fearfully. "Let's just keep it that way. I'll come in and wake Brian up as often as I can. You keep working late and avoid him as much as you can. I think this will work just fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it," Naughty replied. "I'm not going to do that," Brenda stated emphatically. "You're leaving in a few months. I'm going to stay here and show Brian what a wonderful wife I can be. He won't need your skinny ass." "Except that he knows my skinny ass is loyal to him while your round ass is out there somewhere, waiting to be patted by anyone," Naughty objected. "Basically, I control your sex life, or at least your sex life with Brian. I won't let him anywhere near your disgusting cesspool as long as we're in a relationship. I don't want to risk getting sick, and he doesn't really want that either." One thing I've learned, albeit too late, is that a relationship is so much more than sex, Brenda stated with false bravado. In fact, sex without love or commitment is really quite humiliating. I'll do what a wife should happily do for her husband while you just have sex with him. Think about it. Okay, replied Naughty. I have thought about it. Let's do this. You cook a great lasagna and meatloaf for the guy, keep the toilets clean, and wash his boxers. We'll see who's happier. Brian, I have to tell you how ashamed I am and how sorry I am for disrespecting you. Can you ever forgive me? Brenda pleaded. How could he ever trust you again? Varmint asked. He might forgive you someday, but how the hell would you ever regain his trust? That's always been an obstacle that cheaters face. I suggest you try to enjoy the next few months while you're still Brian's wife, at least nominally. Realize what you've sacrificed for a stranger and learn your lesson. Brian doesn't want to destroy his family while Tim is in school. That will give you about 9 months after I leave to do everything you can to get him back. When Tim graduates, Brian will probably kick your ass to the curb, Naughty predicted. Brian, why are you letting her speak for you? Brenda asked. I'm not just his mistress, I'm his best friend, replied Rascal. While you were whispering sweet nothings in Bill's ear, Brian and I were having our own conversation in bed. I promised to deal with this particular situation if and when it finally arose. Could you please leave us alone now?